Mark of the Beast, Part 5, The Idol Pushers. As suggested in previous chapters, we are watching as the Tower of Babel is being built before our very eyes. Nebuchadnezzar's image is standing tall, with Babylon as its golden head. Our world resembles the Babylon of Revelation 18 more with each passing day. The nations are being pushed to unite. Languages and cultures are disappearing into the same earthen mud that was used to construct the Tower of Babel. Currencies are combining, and cash is going extinct. Proud, collective mankind is making a name for himself and reaching unto heaven, while declaring that he is like unto the gods. We seem to be on the cusp of another divine intervention, like that in the Garden of Eden or at Babel, where the angels say, "This is only the beginning of what they will do. Nothing that they have a mind to do will be impossible for them. Come on, let's go down there." Babylon 3030 BC. How idolatry starts. Most of us do not work and live outdoors, so we are not overwhelmed by the immensity and the majesty of the universe on a daily basis, like the dwellers of the Mesopotamian plains were. To be them and to declare atheism under a bed of a billion stars would have been akin to declaring lunacy. In Genesis 1, God says, "Let the stars be for signs and seasons, and for days and years." It should be natural, then, that early scientific observations, like astronomical cycles, solstices, and equinoxes, should become part of worship. The Bible, too, shows the mystical qualities of looking to the heavens at night. Psalm 19 says, "The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament showeth his handiwork. Day unto day uttereth speech, and night unto night showeth knowledge. There is no speech nor language where their voice is not heard. Their line is gone through all the earth, and their words to the end of the world. In them he hath set a tabernacle for the sun, which is as a bridegroom coming out of his chamber, and rejoiceth as a strong man to run a race. His going forth is from the end of the heaven, and his circuit unto the ends of it, and there is nothing hid from the heat thereof." The day, it says, actually speaks, and the night gives knowledge. Their word goes to the end of the world. They give us signs about the future. Think, for example, of the 3 wise men in Matthew chapter 1. The tabernacled sun is described as if it is the Ark of the Covenant. To worship the heavens in the sky as God is obviously a sin, but to look up and feel spiritual is not. And it seems to be through this innocent beginning that alternative religions began. Eventually, a more disciplined study of the night sky produced the zodiac and a hierarchy of magi ruling from ziggurats. The Tower of Babel is typically pictured as a ziggurat, a stepped pyramid, presumably used for astronomy, and possibly designed to thwart any of God's future judgments in case of another flood. The Egyptians, Indians, and even Druids are all thought to have their religions in Babylonian origins, and Babylonian belief had its origin in Eden. Is it any wonder then that we find similarities between idolatry and the truth? For example, the anthropomorphizing of the sun by David sounds a lot like the Egyptian sun god Ra, who made his nightly voyage. Inevitably, skeptics claim that Christianity borrowed from Ra because of the similarities. Ra, a slain savior, dies on a cross of stars in the sky on December 23rd, the winter solstice, being reborn again on the third day. By coincidence, he had 12 followers, and there are also 12 signs on the ancient zodiac. We shouldn't be shocked to learn that the alternative mystery religions in those 2,000 years of Genesis chapter 1 through 10 stem from Eden and have commonalities. We should also accept that there were probably far more foreshadowings and prefigures of Christ during those times that are simply not written down in those brief chapters of ancient oral Edenic history. For example, we might think that clean and unclean animals didn't exist until Moses gave the law, or that the Sabbath didn't exist before Moses gave the law. We might think that high priests didn't exist until Moses gave the law. But all of these things we find already existed in some form, as well as the tradition of a coming Savior, a promise given to the woman that her seed would crush the serpent's head. The idea of a slain lamb for sacrifice was in Eden. We see unclean and clean animals in the story of Noah, and the word remember in the Sabbath commandment seems to indicate that this practice was already being used. Also in Genesis 14, we find Melchizedek, a high priest, and this is before Abraham even has offspring that will eventually be called the Jews. Along with the signs in the heavens and the Edenic traditions, early religions also had religious symbols which were in the form of art, architecture, and statues. Those graven images were not necessarily idols. We know, for example, that the Ark of the Covenant and other temple furniture in the Bible have symbolic carvings on them like cherubim and animals. They are not idols. Similarly, in the earliest alternative religions, material objects were used to provide spiritual meaning and teach lessons. It was a way to focus on or understand and explain their unseen God. The sculpture was never the actual God to the enlightened believer. The Israelites in the region of Dan during Jeroboam's time, for example, didn't come around the corner of the grove and see Jeroboam's golden calf and suddenly declare, "We're now in the presence of Yahweh." They worshiped the spirit or the power that was behind the symbol. And the most common symbol to represent the Creator, for example, during ancient times, was a figure of the human body. Along with the symbolic sculptures came festivals or holy days, holidays. These would be accompanied by feelings of joy, peace, gratitude, and pride, like Christmas or New Year's holidays. They would have been a reflection, a time for socializing, music, and ceremonies. Wise men would have given it scientific explanations, making sense out of nature, and perhaps forecasting future trends. There would be stories and allegories to teach lessons. History would be recounted in order to preserve and continue oral traditions. This was all very healthy for society, increasing solidarity and goodwill through common ground. As modern Christians, we might call these early religions pagan or misguided, but they were not necessarily immoral or evil. But, says Manly P. Hall in his Secret Teachings of All Ages, then came the age of idolatry. The mysteries decayed from within. The secrets were lost, and none knew the identity of the mysterious man who stood over the altar. Eventually, it came to be looked upon as a god. Having lost the knowledge of the purpose for which the manikin was originally constructed, the priests worshipped this effigy, until at last their lack of spiritual understanding brought the temple down in ruins about their heads, and the statue crumbled with the civilization that had forgotten its meaning. Most ancient religions suffered this fate, history reducing them to the negative stereotypes of the decadent baby killers that they became, rather than the enlightenment-seekers that they started off as. History repeats itself, and we can easily see how today's religions, Bible-based or not, are being swapped out for hollow effigies. Even the other traditional institutions of enlightenment that we do not think of as necessarily religious are suffering the same termite erosion. The marriage, the family, civic pride, patriotism, science, academia, medicine, these are all being hijacked by the idol pushers. So to summarize the fate of well-meaning ancient religions, the priest class gets hijacked and corrupted. In Bible prophecy, this is where the sun and the moon go dark. These hijackers replace the original God with a watered-down version, with more partying and less meaning. Then they gradually remove the meaning behind the new idol, until the idol becomes hollow. The religion is now nothing but a social party. Ultimately, the original God is replaced by whatever the priests and rulers, the heavens, can use to fleece and control the people, the earth. If the priests are able, they themselves will become the infallible gods behind the idols. For more information about those who intentionally corrupted the Edenic truth in order to gain power, I recommend any one of these books. Now let's skip forward from ancient Babylon to Babylon 2030 BC and talk about idolatry's ultimate concern. Ancient history professor George Mendenhall explains in his book Ancient Israel's Faith and History that the worship of idols was politically motivated. He says in page 34, by the time ancient people developed writing, these religious texts had become essentially an arm of political control. The unity of the city-state or nation depended on solidarity stemming from the people's common belief in the state god. The clenched fist of Baal, shown in actual archaeological idols, epitomized this centralized, concentrated political power lorded over his people. Even today, we see the same clenched fist on posters and bumper stickers used as a symbol of power. Black power, communist power, socialist power, etc. Since the 60s, it has represented empowerment for various political groups. A group's god can be aptly described as their ultimate concern, according to Mendenhall. The ruling class's ultimate concern is always control. Mendenhall states that, quote, Baal personified power, overwhelming any enemy who threatened the status quo. To worship him was to celebrate power and to extol the role that coercive force plays in human affairs. Indeed, the word Baal means Lord. But even the word government exposes this reality up to this day. Guber, or govern, means control. Ment, or mensis, means mental or mind. Hence, the word government means mind control. Throughout ancient history, the state and the religion were tied together inextricably. If your city-state was conquered, so was your god. Your images were rounded up and replaced by the conquering state's obviously superior gods. Idol worship meant a system of political, social, cultural, and even economic control. Recall from Acts chapter 19 that the whole Ephesian economy was based on Diana worship, and the reason that people were upset at Paul was because he was disrupting their entire way of life, not merely their religion, but also their economy. Is it really any different today? In the words of Brock Chisholm, the United Nations first World Health Organization director, quote, to achieve world government, it is necessary to remove from the minds of men their individualism, loyalty to family traditions, national patriotism, and religious dogmas. And as a similar thinker, H.G. Wells, who authored the book A New World Order, Wells stated in his 1920 essay entitled How a Federal World Government May Come About, that, quote, the coming world state will be based upon a common world religion. Men's thoughts and motives will be turned by education. And education, as the new age will conceive it, will go throughout life. Hopefully, through the lens of history, we hope to explain the old world order and, in turn, begin to see aspects of a new world order forming in our day before our very eyes. This is idolatry's ultimate concern, its plan and purpose with the earth. The God of the Bible does not want robot slaves, but the idol pushers do. Now we jump forward to Babylon 330 AD and discuss the hijacking of the church. In the 1st century, burning incense to the emperor meant affirming allegiance to the Roman gods and the Roman state. Things got even worse when the empire merged with Christianity, and the mind control was accomplished with combined church and state. Papal supremacy began in the 300s, and for 1260 years, idolatry ruled the world. Even as recently as 1864, 160 years ago, the Pope, Pius IX, declared in his Syllabus of Errors that separation between church and state was wrong, and that the old world order needs to be reinstated as soon as possible. Are we naive enough to believe that the power-hungry elites of our modern age have given up on this agenda of concentrated power uniting church and state? Do they no longer share this ongoing ultimate concern for total lordship? John predicts that a unified anti-Lamb force or anti-Christ force are allying themselves to battle the Lamb and will come after its followers in the last days. These are of one mind and give over their power and authority to the beast, which we now know is an empire or a state. Recall from history that the Roman Empire originally tried to snuff out Christianity, but the more they persecuted its followers, the more it grew. So instead of defeating the viral movement, Emperor Constantine and various insiders hijacked it. Much like we saw with Jeroboam, it turned out to be far more advantageous to take a friendly emperor's new clothes approach than a Nero persecutor approach. Recall from the previous chapter that Jeroboam, who made Israel to sin, used a mixture of alternative, modern, progressive, liberal, scientific, diverse, and even old-school trappings. Similarly, with Constantine, Christianity took on an official air and was given a makeover, which resulted in more glitter, more gold, organization, and sophistication. And we are all familiar with the subsequent apostasy, corruption, and idolatry which followed once the money changers and the lawyers took over, as they had done previously in Jesus' time. The ancient mysteries from Babylon were reinserted. Sadly, the truth and the way was conformed to accommodate every Asherah and every golden calf ever spawned from Egypt and Babylon. Idol worship on its surface may seem pretty stupid to us. We might think that the Israelites were pretty dumb to fall for worshiping a golden calf. But if we go to Wall Street today, what do we find? A giant brass statue of a bull. The correlation of stock market greed and Babylon is strong in the book of Revelation. The stock market, for many, is their ultimate concern, or, as Mendenhall would say, their idol. Chapter 18 of Revelation describes Babylon as a global market, trading everything, including human souls, that is, live people, and also people's lives. This overarching, all-controlling influencer is responsible, according to Revelation, for, quote, the blood of all who have been slain on the earth. Revelation 18, verse 24. The bull that fooled Israel is also prominently featured on the European Union's Euro coin, a woman riding a beast. Are we being conformed to this modern image of Babylon? The warnings for partaking in Babylon's beast are severe. Quote, if anyone worships the beast and its image and receives a mark on his forehead or on his hand, he also shall drink the wine of God's wrath, poured unmixed into the cup of his anger. And he shall be tormented with fire and sulfur in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. We are exhorted to come out of Babylon. But what does that mean? Hopefully, we can find out the answer to that question and many more as we continue our series on the mark of the beast. Next, part 6, Deceivers of Babylon.